Hey everybody, this is Eddy Dacius. I'm here, I'm back. So we took a break, but we're back. We have a great guest for you, great show. Very excited for this show. We're gonna be talking about domestic violence and we're gonna be introducing Lovern Gordon. She's great, she's amazing. She's gonna be helping us understanding her career and then she's gonna be talking about her favorite subject, definitely. So here is Reverend Gordon. Reverend, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very excited to have you today with us. And one thing and we already told it. So what can you tell us about you?
Yeah, so I am the founder of an organization called Love Life Now Foundation. We promote year-round awareness around the issue of domestic violence. And I'm also most recently as of this past June, the author of a book called The Legacy He Left Me. And it's a domestic violence awareness memoir that talks about my experiences with the issue as a child witness to it and a young adult survivor. But it also talks about what, the red flags are in those types of relationships, what it looks like to be in that type of relationship, what it looked like to leave. And then now, obviously what it looks like, not just to survive, but thrive after domestic violence. So I'm currently on an international book tour and I'm just completely blessed by it all. So that's me in a nutshell for now.
Yeah. No, definitely. One thing we like to ask our guests is, so what was your purpose? How did you arrive to this new Lovern Gordon? So now she's an ambassador who's promoting, helping people get out of domestic violence.
I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will say that it wasn't any straight road. There were certainly a lot of twists and turns.
Yep.
But for me, I think the tipping point came after I had left the abuse, or I should say escaped the abuse 10 years prior, and taken part in one local beauty pageant that I ended up winning and had to go on to the national leg in California to compete in, and I ended up winning that too. So now I had these two back-to-back titles from this pageant, and domestic violence was an easy choice for me. So I chose that as a platform that year to advocate for. And once the year was up with the titles, I really wanted to continue the work of spreading awareness around the issue. And that's when I decided that this was going to be my life's work. I knew that I really wanted to pursue an avenue that brought me the tools to bring awareness to people that would not have necessarily known that there was help around domestic violence, that they were in a domestic violence relationship, much like myself. When I was going through what I went through, I didn't know about resources. I didn't know about what help looked like. I didn't know what shelter life looked like for domestic survivors. So it was just one of those things that I was just so gung-ho on doing. And then obviously sharing my story. So that's essentially what led me to my purpose. I didn't necessarily knew it was my purpose at the time. I just knew I wanted to continue to do it as much as I could going forward.
No, and well said, and I appreciate you for being here with us. So what are the three most challenging events in your life? Can you tell us?
The three most
go ahead.
Challenging events. I think it's not just one event as it relates to this particular one, but a series of events. So leaving the domestic violence relationship was really challenging. And it was one of those things where I thought that I could just up and just leave. And that was certainly not the case. It was the most dangerous time for me in the relationship. And I had no clue that that's what it would be. And so as challenging as it was, as fearful as I was in doing so and trying to leave, I still pressed on because I knew once I saw the level that this person went to harm me, once he realized that I was not going to come back to him, I knew that I could not return because I knew that at that point he would potentially kill me. um,
Wow.
or hurt me really, really, really bad. And so that was one of the most difficult times in my life. I think the second one was after I had had a miscarriage with my now husband, who
Okay.
I've been married to for next year will be 10 years.
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
have a good, decent, healthy relationship. And we had suffered a miscarriage just before our wedding.
Okay.
Um, and we were planning to announce that pregnancy at the wedding. And we lost the baby about 2 or 3 weeks before. So it was really tough. It was a really tough time. I think the only thing that really brought us to the other side is that the wedding came along and we had so many family and friends around us to support us. And then we, right after went on our honeymoon, and that was a great time to just digress from everything that had happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the third one was me, again, not any one time during this period, but I think the whole time was watching my mother. As I mentioned, I was a child with the issue of abuse. So watching our mother be brutally abused by our father was really hard. It was trauma that, I took on for myself as a child, and it obviously affected me in my formidable years and as well as an adult. So, to this day, I still have nightmares here and there about her abuse, and I always count it as one of the most difficult times because it was a time that I had no voice. I was not
Okay.
heard as a child, right? And so when you're in a home, watching the abuse unfold, there's nothing that you can do. Nobody listens to you. Nobody cares about how you feel per se. Um, and so, yeah, I was one of the forgotten victims. Me and all of my siblings, we were all forgotten victims in that. So, yeah, I think those are the top three.
And I'm glad you're sharing this with us. So going back, thinking back, how was it growing up in this household? How was it for you? How did you guys get out of it?
Yeah, so um, it was brutal. Our father was the abuser. He not only abused our mother brutally, but there was child abuse over my older siblings. I had an older sister and an older brother, and I was 7 years apart from them as the middle child. There were five of us. And I remember coming along 7 years after them and watching the level of abuse that he gave to them for simple little things. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I don't want what they're getting, so I'm going to do the best I can to not get any beatings.
Yes.
And I did everything opposite of what they were doing. So I was the good girl, right? And then watching my mom, it was things where he would brutally beat her in the house and out front in the front of our house for everyone to see. So it was tough. It was, I suffered from asthma uh,
Okay.
till I was 15, till I migrated to the States. And when I got older, I realized that, asthma, or the attacks that I had from asthma, were circumvented, or not circumvented, but, exacerbated by the attacks I was watching my mother
Yep.
get. Um, and then there were a lot of things. I mean, it was like I couldn't sleep well. Sometimes in school I couldn't focus, even though I was a great at testing and all of that during the
Yes.
regular school days. There were days that I couldn't focus, and all of these things I didn't realize. I couldn't put it together until I got older and started learning about the issue of abuse and how adverse childhood experiences, which domestic violence is one of them, can affect you as you get older. So growing up, it was hard. A lot of fear, um, a lot of walking on eggshells. The same things that a victim, who's getting the physical beatings is going
Yeah.
through, or the emotional abuse that they're going through. A lot of the same feelings and trauma children experience. So
Yeah.
definitely, it was really, really hard to watch that and have to witness that as a child.
So would it be fair to say if you had any favorite memory in your childhood?
Favorite memories. Wow. So there were, so it wasn't all bad. Um,
Okay.
our dad did have some bright spots that he sort
Okay.
of made happen, I guess.
Okay.
I remember uh, he getting like a bike for my birthday or something like that. I think
Okay.
that was an awesome time, because really he was never into gift giving. He was very strict, and his whole deal was about going to school, getting an education, making sure you didn't get in trouble. So there was no typical love there. There was no typical. I mean, the way that he showed love, and I don't discount that. In his mind, it was love. It was really harsh, and so there were a few times that he would kind of let up. And we relish those because it was rarely there. And then overall, just spending time growing up in the Caribbean. I grew up in Trinidad. you know
Yeah.
Home
Trinidad,
life. I know
Tobago.
you're from Haiti, right?
Yeah, I'm
you
Asian.
know the Caribbean life is just
Yeah.
something bar none. I mean, you never really went
Yep.
hungry. There was always trees
Always
and
food
produce
around.
fruit,
Yes.
right, that you could come out and eat. Again, I lived there till I was 15, so mangoes were bountiful from a neighbor's yard. um,
Yeah.
Cherries,
Oh man.
plums, Caribbean plums. That is, it was everything, and you never went hungry. And then there was always this community sort of sense, right? Everybody,
Yes.
it was about community. So even if you didn't have, you went to your neighbor and you asked them whether it was
Yes.
a cup of sugar or some rice or some limes from the trees that could make some juice. And I'll give it back to you next week when we get ours.
Yeah.
It was always that type of community life that I completely loved. So yeah, I think those stick out as my favorite memories for sure.
Oh wow. Thank you for sharing this. And like I said, our listeners gonna learn from this. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what was your transition coming here in United States, leaving your country? So was it hard for you? And then, as you explained, the environment you grew up in, how was it for you?
Yeah, it was quite the shell shock because what we knew of the United States. So I'll backtrack and say that my grandparents, who had lived here in the States since the 70s, they always got letters from me about how I was doing in school because they would send things
Yeah.
for us from the States, and my way of thanking them was long letters that I would write. Relishing on the day that I could potentially come to America, visit them, be with
Yeah.
them. And so one year when I was 13, they wrote a letter to our father, asking him if he would let me migrate to the States to finish high school because they really saw potential in me based on my school reports and all of that.
Yes.
And he allowed me to. So, like I said, by the time I was 15, it was, me leaving my family, my four siblings, and my mom and my dad behind to go finish high school.
Yeah.
And what I had known of the States then was via TV, right? So Sesame Street
Yeah.
and Saved by the Bell and LA Law, which was one of my
Wow.
favorite shows back then. Blair Underwood was one of the standout characters back then.
Yeah.
And the Cosby Show. I loved Claire Huxtable as the formidable lawyer mom, right? She could do it all, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember just knowing that only of the States, that everybody knows you have everybody, you come outside and you play with folks, and you go after school, you go hang by the beach, right? And when I came here in the summer of 93, I remember my grandfather picked us up and drove us through the different neighborhoods until we got to where we lived. And it was nice. The street was nice. It was pouring rain. I didn't get to really see it till the next day. And it was a 3-family house
Yep.
that they owned. And, I lived on the first floor with my grandparents. And I just remember, like, everybody knows our family. They were very neighborly and whatnot. But outside of that, I had the whole summer to sort of get acclimated with, the weather and the surroundings. But then going to school that first semester in September, I remember, like, oh my gosh, a lot of people talking about, I remember hearing a lot of folks talk about in the first few days that they lived only with their mom or only with their dad. And
Yeah.
I didn't, even though our family structure was a toxic one,
Yes.
we still had a mother and father, and even everybody in our community lived with their mother and father.
Yes.
So that was a shell shock. And then the way that the boys addressed you, I'm now 16, and that was different.
Yeah.
I just remember, like, they are so rude, like, like, what the hell?
Oh man.
Like, yo, shorty, and all of this, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, you gotta whatever, and it's just like, come on,
Oh
like, you're
wow.
kidding
Yeah, I
me.
know. I know.
I was quite, it was a shell shock.
Yes.
But one I had to quickly get acclimated to, because again, I was here. I knew I had a purpose, and that was to go to school, do good in school. And that's what I did. That's what I tried to do. So yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, thinking back in high school, what was your dream job there when we were in high school?
yeah. So I quickly developed a friend in a girl that had come also that summer from Barbados, and she and I became best friends and still are today. And I remember us talking about what we wanted to do when we got older. And apart from, we want a family, we want the white picket fence, we want, good jobs. My job was that I wanted to become a black owned female advertising agency. I
Oh
knew I always had the gift of speaking. I,
yes.
I took that from my father, and I knew that I could potentially sell anything. I had been told that when I was younger, that I spoke really well. And at one point, I really wanted to become a lawyer. But by
Okay.
the time I finished high school and then came back, again, watching LA Law and Claire Huxtable, those were my sort
Yeah.
of influences on TV, and I wanted to be like them, primarily because I wanted to prosecute people like my father. I was, a very tiny person, coming up, and I knew I couldn't physically beat him because that's what I wanted to do at that time, is that I wanted him to feel the way that my mom felt. And so I was like, okay, I'll become a lawyer, and then maybe I can put him away in prison for good, right? That was always my thought process. But as I got older, as I mentioned, that dream quickly fizzled. And I, then said, I could still use my mouth and become an advertising executive and own an advertising agency. So that was my dream job then.
Wow.
Yeah.
So no, definitely. So I think so. How was it for you admitting your purpose? The reason I said it, a lot of people. So this podcast is about divine purpose, but
Yeah.
we try to help people understanding there's a path you need to take
Yeah.
to get to your purpose. But some, they ignore the path, they ignore the challenge, they ignore the calling. How was it for you embracing your calling?
It was, again, not a straight, easy road. So I think by the time I decided that I wanted to pursue this work, I'd heard from, many of folk that I should start a nonprofit that would make it easier for me to present the work, do the work, all of that. And I did. The following year, I formed Love Life Now, which is the foundation that I run. And let's see here. It's So that's the foundation right there.
Wow.
And for years, for at least the first few years, I was bootstrapping to make
Okay.
this work happen. So I was using a lot of my personal funding to make some of the initiatives come to fruition.
Okay.
And I was slowly and surely going in the red financially, because of it, because I knew that I was so passionate about getting the word out to people, and was sort of ignoring the cost of it all. And so when I met my husband, he was like, okay, so we're not going to do this anymore. You're not going to spend your own money. You need to start raising funds
Raising
and all
fund,
of
yeah.
that, getting sponsorships. And I quickly decided to start doing that. But in doing so, I was met with, I wouldn't say pushback, but more so not being taken seriously, right? By
Okay.
other races, if you understand what I mean.
Yes.
And being glossed over because I was this particular skin color. And that essentially really it, it it dampened my spirits, but I didn't stop. I had come from a background essentially as a banking and finance
Yep.
professional, and part of what I did was business development. So I had developed a tough skin for being told no, and uh, whenever I heard no, that was okay. That is going to bring me closer to my next yes. So I just kept pressing along with that mentality. And that eventually got me the sponsorships that I needed to make these initiatives happen a little bit more comfortably. It got our website off the ground, as you have up right now. It got us, things that we typically didn't have before. We developed a board. We always had a board, but we developed a really conducive board. And our board members are up on the screen now. But yeah, I mean, it just propelled us into an area where we were sitting comfortably to be able to do the work. And like I said, we've done that work now this past November for the past 10 years. And I just continually just any no, which typically doesn't happen these days, but if it happens, I always say now that it just propels me closer to my next yes. So I leaned into it as much as I could. I didn't stray away from it. I didn't let the no's deter me. And I found creative ways to get the message across. In the beginning, we didn't have any money. So it meant that I was using free space at the library,
Yep.
right? I'm local to Massachusetts. So there was a beautiful library space in Mattapan that I used and gathered to have functions. And then we used a restaurant that had like this function room attached to it for our gala. I was hounding people by text, come to the event, come to the event, and getting people into the space. And now I don't have to do that because people show up. They know about the event. They want to help raise money for the causes that we're doing. So yeah, I just leaned into it and just, hit the ground running. I never stopped. And that was, I think, what has brought us to this point is that we've been consistent. Um, Consistency is key when doing any work, right? And
Yes.
I'm just have been blessed to have been able to do that.
Yes, and like I said, this is great advice. But can you tell us what was the best compliment you ever gotten? The best
In terms of
compliment?
the work,
Yes, work or people, what people say to you, and
oh
you
my
feel,
gosh. Like I said, the blessings keep flowing these days and have been, but so there are many. But I think one that stands out for me most recently is on this book tour that we're on. And essentially, I was at a book signing in Trinidad last week, and this I had a news interview with the top local one of the top local TV stations there the day before,
yep,
talking about the book signing and what was going to happen. And this woman approached me during the signing, and she came with a younger girl. So this woman, she probably looked like she could have been in her 70s, 80s. And the girl looked like she could have been maybe 14, 15, 16. And she approached me and she said, "Hi, I saw you on the news yesterday, and I brought my family member here to meet you because she really wants to become a writer. And I just thought you were so inspirational during your interview. I just had to come and meet you. And I didn't know what to expect for a book signing because I've never been to one." And I said, "Oh, well, you have to buy the book, you bring it up to the register, and then you come back and I sign it for you." And she said, "Oh man," she said, "well, I can't afford the book, but I really want her to read it." And I said, "Well, okay." I said, "Well, we just visited the National Library a couple of days ago, and I donated 2 copies there." I said, "So she can go to the library and get a library card and check it out there for free, right?"
yes,
And I remember her saying, "Oh my gosh, that is so amazing." And I said, "Absolutely, no worries." And she said, I saw you yesterday and I didn't know what to expect. And I just thank you for this information." Less than an hour later, This woman came back with her family member, and she said, "We just left and walked where the bookstore that I was having the book signing at wasn't too far from the National Library. So they walked and went to the library, got the library card, and took out
Wow.
the. And so she came back to me and she said, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy. She said, but I just wanted to say thank you for, the way that you spoke to us. She said,
Yeah.
sometimes you see people on TV or in the media and they can be really mean,
Yeah.
or not nice. And she said, you looked easygoing to talk to when you were on the TV, and
Yeah.
you're certainly so nice in person. And I just thank you for that. And I said, oh my God, it takes nothing to be kind, right?
Yeah.
And there were people in line waiting, and they understood what was happening, right? And so I think that for me, that's one. And then two, it's whenever a survivor reaches back to us and says, you really helped me. The funds that you were able to give to help with the domestic violence related expense, it really put us in a good position to leave or escape or stay gone. That always fills my heart, and that to me is one of the biggest compliments that I could ever get doing this work entirely. So I think those two things stick out for me in general.
So what is the most thing you are proud of accomplish?
Helping survivors. Helping
And
survivors. Yeah. We have what's called, and I just mentioned it, but I didn't go into to detail. We have what's called a Get Safe Fund. And, when we raise money, a chunk of the money goes back to that fund. And it essentially helps people who have recently left an abusive relationship, are thinking about leaving an abusive relationship, or have left but need help with a domestic violence related expense. And that can be clothes, toiletries, um, a bill, a plane ticket to get out of the country, a plane ticket to get to another state, bus transportation, an Uber ride. All of these things are often things that keep victims bound because they don't have a gap filler to help with, somebody to help them with. And so that fund helps people. And so for me, I think the fund, and again, the creation of it and it being able to help so many survivors over the last 3 years is what I'm most proud of. But if I'm being honest, I think I'm proud of everything. I'm proud of everything that we've been able to do to date. I don't take any of it for granted because I know it's not by my works, it's his, right? So
yes.
I'm completely grateful for everything. I do not take anything for granted, but I think the fund is something tangible that I can say helps people every other day, or sometimes every day. So
And so let's switch to your wake up call because and like we kind of mentioned a little bit where now Lovern is embracing a calling. I know you said or you started your nonprofit, but what was the my process? What was the challenging where this is it? This is what I need to be. This is where I am. This is what I'm gonna do.
yeah, so I think the wake up call for me was, again, I had taken part in these two beauty pageants. The first one on the local leg.
Yes.
Um, During the interview process for the pageant competition, um, there was, you had to go into a room with about four, I think it was about four judges, three female, or maybe two female and one man. And one of the questions that they asked me was, why domestic violence? Why did you pick that as your platform? And quite honestly, Eddie, up until that point, I had not spoken, in detail about what had happened to me and my mother. And so
Okay.
this was the first time. And so I started talking about my mother's story just a little bit. And then I talked a little bit about what I went through. And by the time I was done, my head was down, tears were streaming down my face, snot was running out my nose because it was so emotional
Okay.
to relate. And I remember saying to myself when I was done, I looked up and I was like, oh my God, these people are going to disqualify me, or they're going to say that she's not somebody that can represent the title, right? Because she's too emotional, or we look at her differently now because we know that she's gone through this. And I remember looking up, and two of the judges, female judges, were crying too. And they
Wow.
said, okay, take your time to, get yourself together before you exit the room. You don't want you don't want the competition to see you looking like this. And
Okay.
I went off to the side, and subsequently each of the two judges came up to me and said, me too, that they had also gone through this in their life. And
Wow.
it was like, whoa, these women sat before me looking polished, well put together. You would never think that this is something that they went through. And here they were saying that I made it okay for them to share their truth. And that right there was like, this is why I need to do this work. If they're going through it and I went through it, who else is just waiting for permission to share their truth as well? So that was the wake up call for me. That was it right there. I said, I'm never looking back. I'm just going to continue doing this work as much as I can.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's surprising. I wouldn't never think. But or was it so now after this, did you feel like you were empowered
Oh
and
yeah.
you felt you over to own that bad memory and you have power now to speak against it?
Yeah. I mean, so I was empowered, yes, but the trauma of what had happened to me certainly hadn't gone anywhere. Over
Wow.
the next few years, as I continue to share my story, it would rear its ugly head, in various different ways. Um, nightmares, cold sweats. I suffered from PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. A lot of people hear that term and they tend to think that it's only Army veterans that suffer from PTSD, but really it's anybody that's ever suffered from any kind of trauma is subject to going through PTSD. Once they're done with it, and it's certainly reared its ugly head because as I continue to share my story, so did everybody else. They poured what had happened to them into me. And I really didn't have an outlet to let all of what I was being put into me out. So I started seeking therapy at that time, and that helped some. But like I said, the emotional triggers of what had happened certainly kept coming. And but yes, I absolutely didn't stop because of it. I honestly didn't understand a lot of it, what was happening to me personally, but I knew that I was again making it okay and giving other people permission to share their story based on them seeing me and what I had accomplished up until that point, to feel okay to share what had happened to me, for them to share themselves,
Wow.
and for people to seek help. So I certainly didn't stop because of it. Eddie, you're mute. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there
So I
you go.
said, how was the support around you? Did you feel like you had enough support?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think again, personally, I didn't know that I needed deeper therapy at the time. But overall, people were so supportive. Again, folks wanting to understand more about what had happened to me and to understand how they could potentially help others in that same circumstance. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the work, I was a one man mission, driven mission. But yes, anytime I asked for help, folks were there, and I thoroughly appreciated that. And that was key, asking for help, right? Um,
Yes.
it's closed mouths don't get fed. So if you don't ask, nothing happens. And so I was very vocal about when I needed help, if I needed help at all. Yeah.
So as we're talking about a support around you, support in your career, saying, can you share who was the most important professional mentor around you when you were
My
growing up?
husband,
Wow.
my
Yes.
husband.
I like
Um,
to hear that.
yeah, for sure. He gave me room. So again, when we met, I was working in the banking and finance industry and doing Love Life Now on the side, the foundation. And he really always sort of kept me on the path of being sensible, spirited person in our relationship, and he's the more sort of structured. I'm like, I want to do it. I don't care how, but I want to. And he's like, let's find a path to get that done, right? And
Yes.
so, he's from Jamaica, and another Caribbeaner, and really
Yeah.
just structured and centered and grounded. And he would tell me things that others wouldn't. He would be straight and upfront with me, and I continue to appreciate that about him, because he's my biggest critic as well as my biggest supporter. But the criticism comes with love, right?
Yes.
And so I always know it's from a place of caring, to make me better, to make the thing that I'm doing better. And so I have always loved that about him. And so yeah, I would put him after God. It's him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we appreciate his support, his mentorship, right?
Yes.
So no, that's very, very, very helpful. And I think our listeners gonna be enjoying and learning about you, or did you arrive to embracing your purpose? So did you always want it to be an advocate for domestic violence?
No, no. As I mentioned, advertising and marketing was at the helm. But um, despite that, after advertising and marketing, it then became I wanted to become a reporter. Um,
Okay.
so I went to school for broadcast journalism. I started out pursuing a degree in advertising marketing, and then switched to broadcast journalism. And I subsequently ended up working at the local um, Fox TV News affiliate here in
Okay.
Massachusetts, for about 4 or 5 years. And I
Okay.
learned from some of the best reporters and anchors. I worked in a separate department on the commercial side, and got a demo reel. I had been offered an interview in Florida. I like the whole nine. Like I was really going towards that. And then I realized, okay, Laverne, like you really can't become a reporter, because to start off in that industry, you had to start off in a lower level market. So Boston
Okay.
is considered, I don't know what it is today, but at the time it was a top five market.
Yes.
So, LA, New York,
Mm,
Boston,
Boston.
like all top five
Miami.
markets, right? And for me to start out, I would have to start out in somewhere like upstate New York,
Good.
like or at the time Atlanta. Atlanta is much
Yep.
higher now. But yeah, so it was like I had a mortgage at the time, I had our daughter at the time. There was no way that I could up and leave my life here to go start out somewhere else. So
Okay.
I ended up going back to banking and finance, and that's, as I said, that's where Love Life Now came to fruition. But to this date, I still use the skills that I garnered from the TV broadcast.
Wow.
I'm speaking everywhere all the
Yeah,
time.
you
You know,
everywhere.
I do, all of these, little video
Yep.
snippets. I edit them together to, create highlights and whatnot. So I
Okay.
certainly used a lot. I tell folks all the time, 9 times out of 10, you will not be using the degree that you went to school for. But there are skill sets that from what you learned then that you can apply to what you're doing now. There's always something that
Yes.
you can pull. And so for me, that again, I've always had the gift of speaking. And so I'm still speaking today, even from a little child, and just using what's innate to me to make the work happen. So yeah.
So as you said, so what would be the most important lesson you learn over your career? You as you touch a little bit where 10 out of 8 or 8 out of
9 out of
10,
10 times, yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of things you learn from in school you're not gonna be applying in your career, but the skill set can
Can
be
help.
flexible, right?
Yeah. And so even with that, so again, I worked in the banking and finance industry and was, national business development for the company. Um, Again, skill sets from there. The sales aspect of things was, you know, take the no, but don't take it as your final answer. That for me was the most important lesson. No matter what you're doing, I mean, I think that can apply across the board. Whatever you're looking to pursue, is don't let one negative experience deter you from what you know you're destined to do, right?
Yep.
If it's because you've now done this thing for 2 years consistently, and that's another key word, consistently. If
Yep.
you've done this thing now for 2 years consistently and you've had no's in your face repeatedly, then I might say, this might not be the thing for you, right? Let's revisit this, right?
Yes.
But if you have a foundation and you've gotten some yeses along the way, you've done it consistently, try to find a path. Surround yourself with like-minded folks, right? So if you're in the beauty industry and you're surrounding yourself with, banking professionals, X that. You want to surround yourself with other, professional people in the beauty industry, to learn from, to take little tidbits from, to find out who their supports were that they might want to pass on to you. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
just be consistent about it and be intentional, I guess is the other word. Intentional and
Intentional.
yeah. So again, don't just go to and this is what I was doing in the beginning. I think that was a big mistake for me. And I think it was a learning curve, was that I was going to any networking event that I was invited to. So my week would look like maybe 6 or 7 networking events that panned out to nothing because there were all these other, and I'm not saying that their jobs were random, but as it relates to what I was trying to do, it was random.
We can call it distraction.
Yeah. I mean,
they're not serving you any,
no purpose, right? So it was like I wasn't intentional. I just knew that I was trying to get a message out. I just didn't know how to. And so 6 or 7 networking events. And it's like I ended up with a bunch of business cards, and it's like you're following up with them, and it's like, yeah, it was great meeting you.
Dead end. Yeah.
So being intentional about where you spend your time and energy, because they are both important. So now I selectively choose where I am going to be at any given point, right? So be intentional, consistent, and persistent.
And that's why we appreciate you being here with us, because I know how busy your schedule is, and I know. So we're very excited to have you. So one question I would ask is, so somebody starting their career, if you had a chance to talk to them, what would be the advice for them?
I just gave it.
Wow.
Consistent.
Okay.
Consistent, and intentional.
Because what about distraction? I know distraction gonna happen. So
distraction is gonna happen, but that's something that only you can control, right?
Okay.
You know what's ahead of you. You know what you want the end result to be. So if you're filling your time with TV or your cell phone and social media, and if you're going to spend your time on social media, let it be towards business, right? And let the interactions that you want happen there. And if people aren't interacting with you, well, then you got to fill your time with a little bit more about how to attract the people that you're looking to get involved in your business. So yeah, distractions are going to happen, but that's not something anybody can help with or help you with. That you have to control yourself, and you have to know what they are. I can't ever tell anybody what their distractions could potentially be. I mean, I know what mine are.
Yeah.
I know what mine are. And I set goals, and I set a structure for the day so that those distractions are not, in my face as much as they should be. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But, every day, like you said, distractions are going to come. It's up to you what you let in,
Oh, well said. Well said. So now this is time for Hot Topic. Hot Topic is a segment where we talk about Hot Topic. So what's Hot Topic? I'm gonna go to your website.
Okay.
And where you said, and I think it's under resources, when you're talking about red flag. Am I right?
Yes. Red flags in abusive relationships.
Yes. So the reason I want to talk about it is because some people might not understand
What they are?
what they are,
Yeah.
and as we have you here, you can you're the best person to tell us.
Sure. So for me, a lot of folks say to me sometimes, well, you watched your mother go through this really bad relationship and you still ended up in that type of setting. And what I often tell people is that when by the time I came along, and for anybody that comes to their parents in their relationships or marriages or whatever, is that they don't get to see the beginning of what that relationship looked like. When you come to your parents or your mom, you're already in a situation with them, right? So for us, we were thrust into what was already happening. I didn't see what the beginning of their relationship looked like, so I missed all of these red flags. And when I got into my relationship, it's because I didn't even know what they were, right? So they went over my head. And for me, um, all of these, a lot of these like were blaring, but I discounted them because I was like, oh my gosh, he's giving me so much attention. He wants to make sure I'm okay. He doesn't want me talking to certain people because so if you want to make that, make it on, put it on the screen as the only thing to show up, just as you had it before, I'll run through them. So, does your partner expect you to spend all of your time with him or her to check in and let them know where you are? That was one for me. Every day, every morning before I got to the office, he would call me at least 3 to 4 to 5, sometimes 6 times. And I took it as, man, he just loves talking to me. He wants to make sure I am where I am, so I got there safely. But it wasn't. It was always him checking up on me. He does your partner act extremely jealous and or possessive over you? I could not talk to any guy friends, and when I had met this person, I had a lot of male friends. And when I started dating this guy, he basically was like, does he want to, do these guys want to, get in your pants and all these other things? It was just like so random. And I always thought, well, okay, maybe he's right because, it's not right for me to be talking to other guys when I'm talking to him. So I can repeatedly heard that and I was like, okay, I'm going to disband that. And then girlfriends, he got jealous when I talked to them because he said that, that particular girlfriend, she doesn't have a boyfriend. So she's going to try to get you to go out, to pick up other guys. That then led to
Wow.
isolation because if I'm not talking to my friends anymore, right? I'm talking to
Yes.
some girlfriends, but at the least, at the very most, it was maybe 3 minutes phone calls, and I would have to cut it short, right? Um,
Yes.
so that then led to isolation. It was, who are you going to see? How long are you going to be there? How long are you talking to this person until you're not talking to anybody really, right? He controlled what I wore. He didn't like short skirts on me. I had to wear a particular kind of underwear, and so we're going there, okay? Because that's what it was. I had to wear my hair a certain way, or else it was too flirty. Did he treat me with disrespect? Yes. And put me down? Yes. Especially when there were attacks. I would be called all sorts of names. And it was because I didn't want to go out with him around my family or friends because it was too much. And the potential of him yelling at me or, being mad at me after we left a certain space, it just was
Yes.
much. Um, does he put down your friends and family, your dreams, ideas, or goals? Yes, he did. Does he lose, or he or she, because this issue goes both ways. Does
Okay.
they lose their temper frequently over little things? He would blow up over the simplest little things, and it would turn into an argument. And oftentimes he would storm off with no sort of resolve. Did he make me feel as if I was walking on eggshells to keep the peace? Absolutely. It was the idea of, how do I make things better? How do I fix things? How do I just stay level so that he doesn't get here, right? Let me just stay here so he doesn't get here. And oftentimes it didn't matter, because he would come home upset over something and take it out on me.
Okay.
Um, did he make does this person make threats to hurt you, leave you, harm you or your pets? Yes. So oftentimes he would say, I'm done with you because you don't want to listen to me, and I'm tired of having to tell you the same thing. He didn't threaten. I didn't have a pet. I didn't have children with him, but he often said, I'll kill your brothers if they ever come at me, any type of way. It just was like, how do you keep the peace?
Peace. Yeah.
So, do they play mind games with you and make you feel guilty? Oh gosh, yes. At 21 is when I entered this relationship.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like I said, I was being blamed for what attack happened, whether it be verbal, emotional, or physical, because domestic violence is all of that. And there were times that he would get so upset and then he would call me. I would call him to say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Come back. I love you. I love only you. And then he would respond to my calls and say, you made me do that to you. I didn't want to do that to you. You made that happen. And if you hadn't done this, this wouldn't have happened. And I feel like killing myself, because I don't ever want to act that way with you, but you make me do this. And so, that guilt trip that you're continuously being given, because you hear it enough times, you're like, gosh, I am the problem. So again, all of these red flags, it could be, they're checking your cell phone repeatedly to see who you talk to. They are, you don't know who their people are. Big red flag. If they're dating someone and they've never introduced you to their people, like, hold up a minute. You've never been to where they live. Hold up a minute. Like, the way they treat their mother. If they're putting on their mother and they're treating their mother a certain type of way, big red flag. So there are a lot of things that, if your gut is talking to you and yelling at you, listen to it. I think that's the biggest, thing that we tend to dismiss, because even for me at the time, I kept saying, this guy's giving me so much attention. I've never had this in my life. And lightning's not going to strike twice if I leave. And that's simply not the truth. There's someone out there for everybody.
Everybody. Yes.
Okay. If this person is making you feel some type of way in here and in your gut, question it, explore it, talk to somebody about it. And again, be open to feedback from other people.
Wow.
You can be a therapist, by the way.
Great job on explaining the red flag for domestic violence, and you did a great job. You couldn't do it better. And one thing I will ask, this is one of our closing session, where what are the 3 books you would recommend to our audience? If you
3
have
books.
it can be 2 or a book.
The first one is the one that I want everybody to read because it serves as a resource around this issue, is my book that was recently released in June. Again, it's The Legacy He Left Me. And I'll hold that up to the screen.
Yes.
And it's available on Amazon, Walmart.com. It's even in a bookstore in London if you're listening to this from London. It's in Trinidad. It's everywhere really online, Barnes & Noble. And so that's the top one, because again, it's what we talked about today. And it's not just me spilling my guts about what happened to me, but it really seeks to break down terminology that people typically don't understand around this issue. So even the term domestic violence, what is it, right? Emotional abuse, what is that? Verbal abuse, and examples of that based on my own experience. Gender stereotypes and how they can be harmful for children as they grow older. Adverse childhood experiences and what that is for children in these relationships. Just a bunch of things that, as I share what happened to my mother and myself, really helps people marry what they've been through in their own lives so that they can begin to understand how they can get out, how they can
Yeah.
seek help, and what help on the other side can look like. I mean, or life, I should say. So that's one. The second one is Why Do Cage Birds Sing by Maya Angelou. I love that book. I read it in school. It's one of my favorite books. And then Waiting to Exhale by Terry McMillan.
Okay.
That was made into a movie. But as we know, the book is always better than the movie. So those are my top three books that I can recommend.
Wow. So, what about movies? Can you recommend
Movies.
movies to our audience?
I'm horrible with names of anything. People think books. I had those top three books are innate to me, obviously, because one of them is mine. But movies, man. So I am I love mafia type movies.
Yeah.
Okay, love mafia, and so anything mafia. I've watched Casino a gazillion times, Goodfellas. Um, the Godfathers 1, 2, and 3 over and over again. Scarface. I am a whole mafia girl.
Oh,
There's one that I just watched I think for the third time while I was in Trinidad with my mom. She was the first time that she saw it, but I also love it. It's called Acrimony.
okay.
Um, Acrimony, and
Yeah, I think Tyler Perry movie.
Tyler Perry movie with Taraji P. Henson.
Yes.
That woo, yeah, that's one of those that I can go back and watch over and over again. Acrimony, yeah.
Wow. So once again, we would like to share about your book. So this is
There he
Legacy,
is.
right?
Yep,
Legacy
the
left
legacy left
me.
me.
Yep.
Yep, yep. And
So
that was at the one of the local book signings in Avon, Massachusetts. Yeah, the Enterprise came into the story that day, and they took that photo. So shout out to the Enterprise newspaper.
yeah,
Shot.
Enterprise Brockton, right?
Yes, the Enterprise of Brockton, correct. Yeah, they did a story on me and the book and all of that. So thank you, Enterprise.
So what's one question you wish I asked you today?
One question you didn't ask. Wow, I think you covered everything. I think
All right.
maybe what is life like now, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
so
yeah, I guess so I consider myself as a thriver, not just a
wow.
survivor, but a thriver. So thriver.
Okay.
And I say that in part because I am completely uh, in love with myself. And I don't say that in a vain way. I mean, in terms of loving what I need to be or to give the best me. And that came at the age of 35. I'm now 44. And I think once that happened, I completely understood what self love was. And even though, again, I'm married, this coming next year, 10 years, I love my husband. I love my kids. I have two. One is my 20-year-old daughter and a 8-year-old little boy.
Yep.
And, I love my family, but I am so in love with the idea of self care. For me, recently that came because, again, I was in Trinidad. I got to visit family. That filled me up so much because I hadn't seen them in 4 years. And then, just time for me to digress from all the work that I had done last week. That was really sort of great. And then, as far as relationship wise, my husband and I, we have a good balance. I believe we do fight. We're not perfect. We do have disagreements. But we never leave the table messy, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. We
Makes
come
sense.
back to the table if we need to. We put the things aside, but we never leave it all like this.
Yep. Yep.
We agree to disagree, and then we come
Yeah.
back and leave it right there, right? And after cleaning up, and so yeah, I'm really grateful for that. I think is and then obviously doing the work that I do. I'm thriving, right? To be able to help other people. That's been one of the biggest things for me is that I've taken been able to take this tragedy of what our family history and legacy was, you know, and it was so prevalent because, again, even my mom, I went to Trinidad to host a 70th birthday party for her.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I was there for. And the people that got up and spoke that knew her from years ago, they talk about the abuse our father inflicted on her. Again, the legacy that he left us, right? But I've been able to take that and turn
Yeah.
it into something that is good, that is helping people. And that for me, man, is one of the biggest thriving pieces that I can ever ask for. I could have never expected, but I'm certainly grateful that it's here. So
Wow. Thank you, Reverend Gordon. She's
yes, thank you
You
for
did a
having me.
great job. You did a great job. I really appreciate the job you did.
Thank you.
And I think our listeners gonna enjoy it, this episode. We had Lovern Gordon. She's the author of The Legacy He Left Me, and you can get it on Amazon. Everywhere you can get a book, you will get
Yes.
the book. And thank you for being with us. This is Eddy Dacius with Divine Purpose Podcast with Lovern Gordon. Thank you, and we'll see you guys later.
Bye.